ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Hammond.
So thank you, Light, and thanks for having me here tonight. So when Katya first asked me to do this, she said, oh, you're going to be a storyteller, and I'm pretty good at telling a story. And then when I talked to Light this weekend, he said, oh no, you have to do the hero's journey. And so I know this book, the Campbell book, and it seems sort of intimidating because it doesn't, on a daily basis, you don't think of your life as a hero's journey. But I think what they were thinking of is the Highline. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Highline story and that journey for me, and then sort of end with the personal journey that's probably a little maybe more important. So the Highline story of how it even came before we got involved is pretty interesting. So the trains used to run down 10th Avenue, and it was called Death Avenue because so many people were run over by the trains, that they hired a guy on horseback to move people out of the way, and he got nicknamed the West Side Cowboy. But he wasn't that great because about one person was killed every month. And this is a New Yorker cover I found from 1933. And you can see how all the trucks, it was just sort of mayhem, and I like that they decided it was going to be a gay cowboy. The other thing I love about you can just still see, you need a biscuit, you need a bakery, that's the old Nabisco factory, and that is that Hooker Hotel that's still there on 14th Street. Some things have not changed. And then so they elevated it. This is along 10th Avenue. You can still see the trains running, the Empire Diner. And it was meant to hold freight. It actually went through buildings. It used to go all the way down to Houston Street. But with the rise of interstate trucking, it was used less and less. And in Thanksgiving 1980 was the last train. It was a trainload of frozen turkeys, so the story goes. And then it was abandoned. And this is what I fell in love with, was just sort of the steel structure that I moved to New York in the early 90s. And so this was to me like our version of the Roman aqueducts, except it was about my dad's age. And then it was in my early or late 20s, and I was a big self-help book junkie, and would take all these kind of self-help courses, and one of them said, you should find a project to work on. And so it was also the first time in my life I was 29 and I had my own office with a door to close, so I thought I could actually do other things besides work. And I read this article in the Times that said the Highline was going to be torn down. It had this little map. I didn't know that it was that long. And I assumed everything in New York had a preservation group attached to it. So I thought I could, volunteer and help out, and that would be my project. So I called everyone that was mentioned in the article. No one was really doing anything, but one person said, oh, there's going to be a community meeting about it. So that August, on a Monday, I actually came back from Fire Island early to go to a community board meeting, which I'd never been to. And I sat next to another guy, Joshua David, that I didn't know. And at the end of the meeting, no one else was interested in saving it. There was no group working on it. Most people actually just wanted to tear it down or didn't care. So Joshua and I went up, and I said, well, I'm really busy. Why don't you start something? He said, I'm really busy. You do it. And so we just sort of exchanged business cards, like I had probably done 100 times before, not thinking anything would come of it. But we actually called each other and followed up. And then what we did, which would have been more exciting for the hero's journey, is if we had actually snuck up there and got arrested or something. But we just called the railroad and they took us on a tour. But this is what we found, which was 1.5 miles of wildflowers right in the middle of the city. And what I fell in love with was this weird tension of, hard and soft, man-made nature, advertisements, grasses, wildflowers, the Empire State Building. And but we still didn't really know what we were going to do. And what we didn't have was we had no plan. We had no money and no relevant experience. And sort of in a lot of ways that was the key to the success. And I feel like those are the things that keep people. I talk to a lot of people that are starting things, and those are the reasons they often cite that it's not gonna work. So I want to talk a little bit about how those are, can be assets. So this was my terrace when I started the Highline. And so I obviously did not have any kind of green thumb. My strategy was anytime I found a dead plant on the street, I'd drag it up. I would never after I started the Highline, I'd never let anyone see my terrace because I didn't want it, I thought they'd lose faith. And so for my career I was sort of kind of started. I was a history major in college, worked at Ernst & Young, was really bored, quit after a year, and then just started working at startups. I helped start an AIDS HIV website that was for profit. My favorite job was I helped launch an in-flight catalog, a catalog that went in hotel rooms and airplanes, and so I was basically selling gold roses and nose hair trimmers out of airplanes, which those were our best sellers. It was always Sky. This is what kept SkyMall in business as well. And then sort of for a creative outlet, I was a part-time artist. I found some paints one time, or I actually bought some paints from a homeless guy next to my apartment and started painting, and I never got a gallery. That's also another hero's journey that didn't happen. I always wanted the gallery and become a painter, quit my job. But I had some art shows, and I found this old article about my painting. I just like it because I feel like I looked really good when I was 30. I have another picture when I'm 39. But and Joshua was the travel writer, the other guy we started this with. So, and what was really let me go back. So what was helpful? Keep it on there for the rest of the slide. Is that we didn't know, we weren't architects, we weren't designers, we weren't planners, so we had to go out and get help from architects, planners, fundraisers, people in politics, lobbyists. And actually what they liked is that we knew nothing. They were so used to dealing with people that thought they knew a lot that it was actually sort of refreshing for them to be able to get involved with someone. And most of the people, when I go back and ask, did you think this was really going to happen? They said no. But y'all were so eager that we just were willing to help out. The other thing that was really helpful was having a thick skin with rejection. And this is what anybody that starts something has to have. But no one is born with this thick skin or likes rejection. And where I learned it was in that catalog company. Is my first job was just calling hotels and asking if they'd put this catalog in their room, and they would all say no or hang up, and it was very demoralizing. And so I started this, and I was by myself in this office, just cold calling. So I started this little game where instead of a sales goal, I had a rejection goal, and I couldn't go home until I get rejected so many times each day. And it just sort of freed me up. And it was also when I was in my 20s, and I started applying it to when I would go out to bars. And so if you're not getting rejected, then you're just not asked, you're not hitting on people. And so I took that, which worked in bars and hotel catalogs, to the Highline. And I went and found my old notes from when I first started. And this was my grand plan for the Highline. So I wrote Highline, a box around it. And then I just started writing people's name that I should call. And then I would call one and they say, that's a dumb idea. But then I'd call enough people, they'd tell me to go somewhere. That's Joshua's phone number, sort of down, who I started this with. And even if I look back on this after a month, I would have think, what a waste. And none of these people help. Now, 15 years later, there's so many people that this guy's on my board. Ann Pasternak now runs the Brooklyn Museum. She helped us do art projects. It was just that constantly calling and not knowing what was going to lead to the next and lead to the next. Also with rejection, opposition, when we started it, now it's a popular project, but at the time, actually, the property owners wanted to tear it down, the community board wasn't in favor, and this guy, Mayor Giuliani, hated it. He signed a demolition order a few days before office. So sort of daunting, but we also learned to turn this was one of our best sales techniques, because if they didn't care about the nice pictures of the Highline, we could say Giuliani hates it, and they'd say, oh, this must be a great idea, happy to help. Just to, anything that he doesn't like, happy to give a little money to. And the other thing, on raising money, the way I thought things happened in New York was that rich women on the Upper East Side got behind something, and they had fancy parties, and then it would happen. And so we went to some of those people. They weren't really interested. So we just went to our own people we knew. We just would start emailing friends for events, and Josh and I were both gay. And so I remember one of my friends, a straight friend from college, came to our party. He was like, there's so many men at this event. And this is Florent, who had the great restaurant, who's a big supporter of ours, who when you're dressed up as Mary Antoinette with a high line running around his bustle and his hat. And then this really has nothing to do with the talk, but this is a different talk I gave called Behind the Bushes, The Secret Homo History of the High Line. But it's just always it's always good to put up, people get bored, naked picture of a man. And then going back to the plan, what was the, what is the plan? So everybody, when you start saying, they want to know why you want to do it. So people would call like, well, why do you want to save it? What do you want to do with it? And we would say, we don't know. We're not architects. We're not planners. But one of the tricks, we got a guy, Joel Sternfeld, to go up there and photograph it. And he photographed it in all different seasons. And then we published a book of it. And this was our plan. It was like, this is what we basically sold the High Line on. Especially this next. And because it basically, if you go to a plan, then people are like, well, I don't want that paving, or I don't like those plans, or why don't you do this? Why don't you put a stair there? And so what people could do is they could see this and they think, oh, it's a place for wildflowers, it's a place for rail history, it's a place for architecture, it's a place for art. Created a lot of people to be able to get behind the project. And so then instead of going to a design competition, which you normally do, and getting real designs, what we wanted to do is let people come up with any ideas, no matter how crazy they were. Because at the time, still no one knew what the High Line was. So this was my favorite for many reasons, but the mile-long lap pool. And then there were just a whole bunch of designs, but it helped people sort of open their eyes. Okay, there's a lot that could be done with this. There were art projects, like this was from Russia, an icon, a political manifesto turning into a park and a prison. I think High and High Line. And this is just talking about the programming. What would happen on and off the High Line, which is actually really influenced about what we do now. Now we do over 400 free programs. Because it's so popular with tourists, we want to make sure it's still popular with New Yorkers. Next. And my other favorite was the mile-long roller coaster. And then we had the exhibition of all of these. We exhibited 720 of these in Grand Central because we wanted it to be more than just a local project. We wanted to feel like all New Yorkers were part of it. And then when we did the design competition, again, because we didn't know what it was going to be, we decided, well, let's put it out there. What do people want? So we sent this postcard, what do you want, to all of our supporters. And we had the first of what turned out to be about 24 different community input events to find out what people wanted. And what people said they actually wanted was they wanted the spirit of the Joel Sternfeld photo. And they wanted a lot of the different things that all those supporters came. They said, doesn't matter exactly what the design is, but we want that spirit. So, which actually sort of scared me, and this is one of the cards someone submitted. The High Line should be preserved, untouched as a wilderness area. No doubt you will ruin it, so it goes. And I put this above my desk, because this was my fear. This is actually what I thought we would do with it. I thought we would ruin it, because we had to remove everything that was there. And this is what it was like. It was like our own private, garden in the middle of the city. And we had to remove it all. So how do you, what do you do? And when we, when we were doing the design competition, I was reading this book, The Leopard. And there was this quote that said something, the more for things to stay the change, I'll read the book. If you want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. Or I think of it as like, for things to stay the same, everything has to change. And so we thought about, and Josh and I talked about that, and this is one of the competition entries. And I loved it because it had sort of the spirit of the High Line, but it was totally different. It spoke to the wildflower aspect of it, but yet it introduced this new language. It put back the tracks, but then it introduced this planking system that blurred the line between hard and soft. And so instead of just slavishly recreating what was there, it created a kind of new magic that spoke to, I think, what I fell in love with. So when we built it, and we started going up there, I was like, oh, they got it right. This is great. But is it going to be great when people are up there? Because it was, for so long, it was like just a few of us. And then when it opened, it was actually got much better. Because the magic of the High Line is not the design, it's the people in the design, in the interaction of the people. And that really is what makes it work. So you might think, that would be when I think of my hero's journey, we opened, we were going to open the Highline in 2009, but I was not actually that happy. So I found a picture. I'm a little vain, so I keep showing old pictures of me. So I looked up a picture for this talk of this was taken about 4 months before we opened. And although I think I wish I still looked like that and young, but I remember that guy. And I remember, I look into those eyes, and I was not happy. And even before the success of the Highline, I'd been pretty successful at a lot of things I'd done, but I had trouble enjoying them. And since my 20s, I would come home from work exhausted because I was a good worker. I mean, that's also part of how we did the Highline. We worked hard. But I would put my head down, exhausted, and then my head would explode with thoughts, worry, self-hatred. I mean, just sort of maybe the garden variety New Yorker anxiety. But it wasn't that great. And so even in my 20s, before I started the Highline, I thought meditation would help. I went to all different kinds of classes, books, like when we had cassette tapes with the old yellow Walkmans, if you all remember those. And I just none of them clicked. It didn't seem to work for me, but I kept trying. And finally, a few months before, actually after this picture was taken, I went to another class to try, and one of the things I just kept trying, I guess sort of like that rejection, I just kept thinking, okay, at some point something's gonna help. And finally, either it was the right time or I learned, this right technique. I learned from actually one of Light's colleagues, Michael Miller, and it clicked, and it just started working. And I even went to London to do a meditation retreat 2 weeks before the Highline opened, because I realized that was going to help me get through that opening. And so, the Highline opened. It was a huge success. And I wish I could say I learned to meditate and I was completely happy. When the Highline opened, I could appreciate it. And that actually is not the case. I appreciated it a little bit, but then I started worrying about everything that was wrong. And it was a great success. We now one of the top tourist attractions in New York. It's inspired projects all over the world. But what really has made, it's been a slow journey for me. And the Highline from when we started it to when we opened was about 10 years, from 99 to 2009. But my own journey for that kind of finding that kind of happiness or just simple peace has taken a lot longer. But I think the thing that's been the most exciting to me when I was thinking of okay, hero's journey, what's the destination that is meant the most for me? It would probably be it's simple in some ways, in that now most nights, not every night, but most nights, when I go to bed now, I put my head on the pillow when I fall asleep, which maybe for most of y'all is pretty normal, but for me, that's the true miracle. That seemed almost more unlikely than the Highline. So that was the journey.